Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this program on how to improve garden soil fertility in both fall and winter. We're very lucky today to have Master Gardener Mint Pasakdee, who will be presenting the talk. We also have Louise Christie, who will be monitoring the chat for your questions, so feel free to pop them in there at any point. We'll try and get to as many as possible towards the end of the chat, but we will always provide you with the link for more information if not. So without further ado, Mint, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, and then just to remind you that the handouts will be emailed to your registration email. So feel free to sit back and relax about taking notes. So and thank you everyone for spending this afternoon with me. So my name is Mint. My official name is Mint Pasakdee. So I'm a member of a volunteer for UC Master Gardener and also Master Composter in Santa Clara County. For those of you, you might already attend some of my talks. So I do give a talk in the area, Santa Clara, West San Jose, and Cupertino. So the topic of my talk today is improving garden soil fertility in fall and winter. For those of you that not familiar with our program, and this is the first time that you learn about UC Master Gardener program of Santa Clara County. So we're part of a volunteer for University of California Cooperative Extension. Miss Christie and I are trained volunteers. So we do train, we welcome new volunteer members. We do train new volunteers every 2 years. Unfortunately, during this pandemic time, we decide to postpone the training next year. So we should have more information on our website. Our website has, tons of information, for those of you that are into gardening and, want to learn more about, all kind of gardening related questions and information. You can contact us, the best way, it would be email, as now that the office is closed, you cannot walk in. You can give us a call Monday to Friday to ask gardening question. Excuse me. For those of you that are new to our program, I would recommend that, you go to our website, mastergardeners.org. And if you could, if you put your email and sign up for our monthly newsletter, that's kind of the best and very good information as a reminder, for us that do hobby gardening, that, when that month coming up, what should you plan to do? Let's say that now that, you can tell that we've been getting this cool and breezy night, so then maybe you should think about protecting some of your tropical or subtropical plant because, they transition to fall and winter months. We do have several demonstration garden throughout the county, from Palo Alto down to Gilroy. And we open to the public at, some special events. So it's nice to go visit and you will have a good idea about your, not just gardening, but, landscape and native plants, etc. We do sell our plants in fall and spring. We do have a big event at Macho Cotto Park, which is South San Jose Park. Again, due to pandemic this year, both of those events are postponed. And, as a volunteer, we give a talk at different events. We do tabling at some of those events, and we do advice to teachers that want to have recommendation about setting up school garden. So if you want to contact us, please go to the website and email us. Outline of my talk, I would, go over, topic that include healthy soils, healthy plants, plant nutrition, fertilizer type, cover crops, mulch, and also sheet mulching. So as we mentioned, if you have a question or need clarification about the slide when I'm talking, feel free to put that question on the chat. And some of the question will wait until the end to answer. So I like this quote that come from U.S. Department of Agriculture, Natural Resource Conservation Service, healthy soil for life. So you probably hear a lot about term of soil health, and then, it's similar to soil quality. So the definition is the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustain plants, animals, and humans. This definition speaks to the importance of managing soil so they are sustainable for future generations. To do this, we need to remember that soil contains living organisms that, when provide the basic necessity of life, food, shelter, and water, perform function required to produce food and fiber. I sort of show these two pictures here that, we often, sort of don't recognize or neglect, how important to have a healthy soil to produce a healthy plant. I just happen to have a background and train in college as a, soil science major. So, when people call soil as a dirt, it does have two big different meaning, because when we talk about soil, it's a living system, and dirt is just, like more like the soil that they use during construction, things like that. So, living soil, like if you dig your backyard garden and you found those earthworms, that's a very good indicator for a healthy soil, you have a good soil quality, because in order for those to live in the soil, they need interaction with microbes and other living things in the soil. So that's already, it's a good soil to start with. So now, to maintain it and sustain it, to have you, a bountiful garden, so we're gonna learn more about that today. Soil components with overall average. So in a way, like if you, this is kind of like the basic soil science, So half of the soil component are air and water, and another half, including mineral, which is kind of, like depends on native soil character. So they're 45% mineral and then 5% organic matter. And that's sort of the maximum, overall in California, our soil organic matter tend to be below 3 or even 2%, because the way that, our Mediterranean climate, the organic matter does decompose fast. So the soil does not keep the organic matter that high. So that's a soil solid part. And then the pore space, which is kind of important as a gardener for us, because we are the one that manage this air and water space. So when you think about it, like every time you water, the air space reducing and you increase the water in the soil, sort of the plant root ball. And then, you have gardener that, love watering, and then the one that don't water enough. So that's a fine line about, manage that to have a healthy plant and bountiful garden. So this is a, kind of a big picture, but just the idea that if you haven't heard about it, the soil food web, is kind of referred to that, sort of this food web that beneath the soil. And the part that when I mentioned earlier about that organic matter, that 5%, that organic matter is very important, because that's sort of, so that's the main major food source for all these, microbes that, bacteria, fungi, nematode, and, other things that live underneath the soil. So they are the one that part of this decomposed organic matter, and that's how it's released the nutrient that the plant can take up and keep the plant growing. So I will talk more about it, but I just want to kind of show you that there are, like, sort of like, the whole world underneath this, the ground there, that part of the soil food web. And another term that I like to mention, is soil texture. So there are like 3 components of the soil texture, excuse me. So, we often that, like in this Santa Clara Valley, our native soil are clay, and some of those of you that dig a hole in the backyard and probably be like, oh my God, like you hit this, it's so hard to dig the soil, and, the soil very compact because of the clay component in that present in the soil. So when you think about clay soil, you would be the soil that would make, you can make a ball, or, like it's become like almost like a Play-Doh in a way. But when you think about other part of soil texture, there are component of sand, you know, so you can think about when you go to the beach, you know, sand would be like, you know, those gritty feeling. So that's the texture of sand. And silt would be represent like carb or flour, you know, like, so like when you're cooking, you know, you use flour in, you know, making pancake and baking. So silt is carb, that type of texture similar to flour. So the perfect soil texture is loam, so which has a combination of 3 of those together. However, you know, it's very hard to control soil texture. So as a gardener, we just have to manage what we have on the backyard, you know, to meet the plant need and, you know, again, you know, to grow productive garden. So this is pretty much, you know, sort of our, as a gardener, right? So when we have healthy plant, we are, you know, happy gardeners. So this picture, you know, this came from, you know, my community garden. I have a bed, the one in the middle. I have a raised bed that part of City of Santa Clara Community Garden. So this year has been wonderful for tomatoes that I happened to plant it earlier. So, so my family enjoy yummy tomato this year. And for carrot, you know, we have good years and bad years. So those are carrot and radish. So radish is one of the easy one. You know, they're only 4 to 5 weeks long for crop. Just make sure you plant or you sow seed at the right time. So, you know, knowing about what to grow is also important for the timing. So now the topic is about plant nutrition. You know, plant just like us, right? So plant do need food. So food for plant, you know, so the basic nutrient that plant need would be, you know, like carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And that's, you can think about plant do photosynthesis, you know. So they, you know, they do get those, you know, from air and water, and as well as from the soil. But the macronutrients or the primary nutrient that important, that sort of lead us as a gardener to have to supplement it, you know, either go buy compost or fertilizer, because you need to have you know, higher yield or, you know, productive yield at that season. So those primary macronutrients are nitrogen or N, you know, phosphorus or P, and potassium or K. So this is gonna kind of like be back at those high school chemistry, you know, just hang with me. So I just kind of want to give you some idea that then you can kind of apply it to use on your garden. So secondary nutrient would be the nutrient that important, you know, and majority of them, they already are present in the soil, you know, calcium, magnesium, sulfur. And then we have a group of micronutrients that I will show you on the next picture. So this is carb, show you that, you know, like I mentioned, you know, the basic nutrients start from carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. And then primary macronutrient, you know, in this circle here, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And secondary would be calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. And micronutrients you can think about as just like us, right? So we do take supplement from time to time. So for plants, there were different type of plant or crop, you know, or fruit tree that you probably heard that, you know, like you need to supply zinc or copper, you know, in order to help the tree to be to stay healthy. You know, certain type of plant or soil, most of the soil already contain all of this. But again, you know, when at some point, if the plant show deficiency sign, so that's the time that you have to fix those symptoms by adding those supplemental nutrients to the soil. So the main one that I like to have, you know, focus would be the N, P, and K. So this is kind of a nice picture that to show you that, you know, like what are those for. So nitrogen, you know, we call it as the leaf maker. So the production of help produce the new cell and enzyme. And then, you know, they're part of the green pigments, or we call chlorophyll. They're part of photosynthesis. So the leaf area, you know, the more they have, you know, they can produce more food and the plant can grow more vigorously. They help with leaf and stem growth, and then, you know, they can grow fast or slow according to, you know, like nitrogen supplement in the soil. So next is the flower inducer or fruit makers. which are potassium or K. So the K would encourage uptake of water. It helps in the development of flower and fruits, and also increase plant resistance to disease, and help making better use of light and air. Last but not least, this is what hiding underneath the soil. So the root maker and the flower inducer, so which is the phosphorus. Phosphorus encourages root growth and blooming, and then they are essential part of photosynthesis. So they involve in formation of all oil, sugar, and starch, which is the part of pretty much in the fruit production, when we harvest fruit. And then it helps with the transformation of solar energy into chemical energy. So next is about soil pH. It's not common for us, now that, there are more available tools that you can have. If you're curious about your soil, you can also measure for soil pH, or you can send the soil sample to the analytical lab to test for, some of this chemistry analysis. It's pretty common for farmer because, they manage pretty big part of the land, right? 1 acre up until 10,000 acre, etc. But again, just to show the importance of soil pH, because the pH is, either acidic or alkalic property of the soil. And soil in California in general, the native soil will stay around 7.5 and up, the longer you add compost, or the longer you use that soil as a part of your garden practice, it will lower the soil pH, which is actually good because you can see that all these nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, if you look at it, it's a little bit hard to see here, but just in general, when the soil is acidic, those nutrients are not available. But then they prefer, slightly acidic or even neutral. Oh, sorry. So then they become available. And then when the soil stay alkaline, they're not available. So which is like ideally you want your soil to stay about, 5.5 to 7, which is like help with, the release of this nutrient in the soil solution, and the plant root can take up. So this is just kind of the idea of, like plant leaf can be a good tool for us to look at, because they can show like not only deficiency, but also toxicity. So just not to overwhelm you, like, it's not easy to diagnose this, it does take sort of, interest and experience and practice, but just the idea that, like from flower bud up until, stem, and different, we call young leaf, which is the leaf that, the new leaf, which is like on top. And then we call old leaf, which is more like the old leaves that, is already produced this leaf for some time. So, so for example, nitrogen, there would be, if you notice that yellow leaf on the old leaf, which is more like, the bottom or the branch that near the trunk, etc. So those are the sign of nitrogen deficiency. And then, like for potassium, you can see that it's not just the yellow leaf, but it start having this sort of the edge that turn brown. So you can tell that, like, there are several detail for this deficiency chart for micronutrients. And then I just want to show you that this is has avocado tree. So this is an ion chlorosis, which means that it shows that, it's a study by the UC researcher that, when you have, like the ion deficiency, so how it look like, and you see how like there will be yellow leaf and with the green vein present. So you can kind of Google image some of these symptoms, but again, like there are several factors that related to this leaf symptom. The one that I like to emphasize is because so there's a couple of things. So for those of you that are interested in having the gray water to be used on your garden, or some of you that already have it happen. The gray water does contain quite high salt content, or the system in your water filter system that have salt filtration. It could cause the plant to show this type of symptom. If you see like at my arrow here, this is strawberry with the brown edge. So that's the sign of salt injury symptom. Often, sometimes it's not bad at all. Like, it does impact that the plant will, excuse me. So unless it's impact the fruit, the plant will try to get, this is how the way that the nature, like the plant try to get rid of salt at all this brown area. So you can remove the dead leaf, but instead of leave it around the plant, just remove it entirely and use it in compost or put in the green bin. Excuse me. And then, another note I like to focus is on when I call salt, it could be sodium, calcium, magnesium. So those are salt-based element, but calcium actually is important, just like us. Calcium is part of bone structure. So for those of you that often grow tomato and notice this type of symptom, not only tomato, it could be bell pepper and also eggplant. So those are not disease. It's actually the sign of calcium deficiency, or we call, the term is called blossom end rot. So which means that the plant has a hard time extract the calcium from the soil. So it's a combination of water management. Sometimes if you let it dry too long, they couldn't take calcium, and then the fruit have that dent or it turn brown. So it's not disease, but then, when you have it for a while, it start having moldy and stuff. So that has to be, removed. If you have just a little symptom, you can just cut it off and it's still edible. So as I'm going to go on, is any questions so far?
Well, I think there's been several questions. One that you might want to address, getting back to the pH, is about acid-loving plants, specifically about azaleas.
Oh, okay.
The questioner wanted to know, should I just give up on azaleas or should I try to grow them? What can I do? And also, could they be grown under redwood trees? Would that help?
Okay, there's a couple things. So like, so for plant that, acid loving plant, like not just a azalea, but also like, let's say blueberry, apply this sort of like the special potting soil or special soil because of the acid, right? I can just go back to this real quick. So those plants we try because we call them acid loving plant. There's a couple ways to do it on the ground, or you have it in container. So I do sort of like, for us to go in the ground, I just kind of make sure that I mulch them, because and once in a while it wouldn't hurt to add around those plants, because coffee ground does turn the soil to be acidic, but you just have to be careful not to overdo it, because the plant will show up sort of those brown spots, because it's too much acid, they have to stabilize it. Supposedly redwood, the pine tree, when they drop those needles, they would turn the soil to be acidic, but it would take time. But azalea, you can correct me, Luis, I'm not sure. Do they need sunlight? Like if you grow it underneath the tree, that's the thing about, excuse me, if they not do well, there's two things, like the root can be, the azalea root and redwood, because the redwood tree, even though they're big tree, but the root stay on top soil. So they might compete each other. That's why you don't have a healthy plant. So that would be one thing.
Yeah, I would
So
agree
try to
that
see
growing
whether
anything
space-wise,
under
how you do it.
growing almost anything under a redwood tree would be very difficult.
Right? Yeah, like I would say, like if you grow it too near the redwood, but then the redwood leaf itself, like you can use it as a mulch. I think that would help with Acelia.
There's another comment, someone saying they have lots of redwood trees and having trouble growing things. If you're having trouble growing things under a redwood tree, it's probably not because the soil is too acidic. It's probably because of root competition, like Mint was talking about. There's just too many roots.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And then, like shade, you have to think about like tomato, especially summer crop that we love, they need sunlight, like not many people are aware that if you don't have enough sunlight during the day, they're not going to be prolific, like for pretty much fruit trees and all those like when you think about farm, right, they actually open space, so they got tons of sunlight during the day. That's why the farmer can grow like very productive tomatoes and strawberry and all those things. So different type of plant do require sunlight at some level, but I would say that you need at least 6 hours of sunlight. If it's less, it's not going to work because the tree would shade it and you might not have a good productive garden.
Yeah. I think you could go ahead and go on.
All right. Okay. So the next part of my talk would be, type of fertilizer. There are various forms of fertilizer. We call it, solid, or in type of pellet. Some of them, look more like powdery, and then some of them you can use it as a, mixed with water, which is a liquid form. The two major groups are synthetic or chemical-based fertilizer. And mostly they, if you walk into, garden center or those Home Depot Lowe's, they have tons of variety that, pretty much as a consumer, you sort of have to like really study what you need because it can get overwhelmed because of those selection. So most of the lawn fertilizer are synthetic or chemical-based, and of course, the one that people sort of, know it by name, it would be Miracle-Gro. So those are synthetic kind, and they often, with the chemical-based, the formula I will show with you later, but just to make a note that they have a salt component, which means that, the long-term use of this synthetic chemical fertilizer can add salt to the soil, and plant, majority of plants are salt sensitive. So you have to be aware of that. For organic or natural-based type of fertilizer, those are manures, compost, fish powder. There are several byproducts that, plant byproduct like alfalfa meal, cottonseed meal. And then when you look at the label, it would, I would show with you how to read the label, but pretty much they would tell you where they derive from. So to compare, those two, sort of for the picture, synthetic, often, it come in smaller, because they're more concentrate. So they're less bulky. They're easy to, mix with water, or, they're highly soluble, which means that when you add it, like the plant can take up and you might see result fast, But again, if you don't manage it properly, you can contribute to this nitrate leaching, that part of groundwater issue, which is not good for us. They often seem like they cost less per application, but because the way that, they're very highly soluble and they fast release, so then you need to apply it more often, which is like at the end, you might pay, it might cost the same for the long term. So you have to wait and see. So for organic one, they are less concentrated and more bulky, like manure, compost, you need quite a bit. So they're less soluble, which means that they're slow release. So in a way, you don't actually choke your plant. When you apply, those nutrients will become available at slower rate. So plant will slowly take up. And then even though they cost more per application, but you don't need to apply that frequent. I like this image, just to show you that on your left, this is organic fertilizer, which is like you sort of feed the soil, it's more like that's organic farming solution that, you feed the soil. So when you have healthy soil, you will have healthy plant. So when you add organic fertilizer, it go to be part of organic matter, and then the microorganism convert to soil nutrient, and then it's available for plant root. But when you utilize synthetic fertilizer, you sort of feed the plant directly. So because they already soluble, so the plant will take up directly. But again, you have to be careful to not, over apply, because it can be toxic to the plant if don't apply it properly. So this is carb that, when you read the label, this is just, for example, that this is like, let's say that this is a bag of fertilizer. So the 3 number is always represent nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So that's NPK. And then, it's actually the percentage of that nutrient in the bag of fertilizer. So let's say that for this one, just a simple calculation. This is a 10% of nitrogen, 10% of phosphorus, and 10% of potassium. So if you bought a 50 pounds bag, so it's about 5 pounds of each of those fertilizer in the bag. But again, they are mixed with, the sand or other things that we call filler, because you don't want to use too high concentration of those nutrients, because it can toxic to the plant. So it's part of fertilizer law that, they require that, you have to mix with the filler for application, for easy application process and safety concern. So if you're familiar with different type of fertilizer bag, often the organic type of fertilizer, they would have a lower number. So this one, example that I got from the internet, 543, which means that there's like 5% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus, and 3% potassium. And then, when you look at it, for this one, they also include 9% calcium. So this is not common. Most of the time, you might have to buy micronutrients like calcium, iron separately, but for this brand, somehow they have it together. So when you look at this is currently analysis. So for fertilizer, you might be surprised, state of California do have a fertilizer, California Department of Agriculture, they actually regulate those fertilizers. So in order for the company to sell fertilizer in California or anywhere in the US, they have to apply for license, and they have to send in the sample and show that the analysis meet, those labeling. So then, this is like 5% nitrogen, and then they tell you have 1% water soluble, and 4% insoluble, etc. So this is the one that I want you to make sure that you read it, because sometimes they call their brand organic, but then when you look at it, the organic mean it has to be came from natural-based product, which is like for this one is plant nutrients that derive from poultry manure, which is chicken manure. But poultry can include, like all the bird, right? Chicken, turkey, etc. So, and then another one that, for organic farming. So for those of us that, like you are aware that now, we have option as a consumer for organic versus non-organic food. So the organic farmer, they must use the one that actually listed under different agencies. So they already proved that, those are safe to use under organic production, because organic production, they cannot use any chemical fertilizer, just on the side note. So for this one, like we can use it if it's available for home gardener, we can use it, and also the farmer can use it. The organic farmer can use it as well. So for all, the sort of the popular guys here, Miracle-Gro is a brand, and they do have several products, including potting soil. So for this one, I know it's small. Sorry, I tried to find a bigger one, but this is all I can do. But if you can kind of see my arrow here, the Miracle-Gro, this bag, it has, it's called Flower Food 15-30-15. remember when I said that majority of all like, you know, organic kind, it would be stay lower, like this is only 5. So this is 15, which is pretty much 3 times more concentrate. So you can see that the bag tend to be smaller, and you use, always make sure that you read the direction for use, because, you know, that's important that, you know, you don't kill your plant because you over apply. If you under apply, you know, usually it's fine, but often, you know, it get too toxic to the plant that instead of like giving them the food, you know, you sort of, you know, unknowingly like kill them. So make sure you follow direction strictly. So for this guy, you know, they have 15% nitrogen, 30% phosphorus, 15% potassium. And this is the area that said derived from. So for this one, it has urea, ammonium phosphate, urea phosphate, potassium chloride, etc. So when you read about it, you know, if just, you know, like this is like salt-based content, you know, like you have a lot of salt mixed in, you know, it's part of the chemical analysis. So just like how I said it earlier, the long-term use of Miracle-Gro and other type of synthetic fertilizer could lead to, you know, salt accumulation in the soil. So just be aware of that. So where to apply fertilizer? I show this tree that, you know, I think like for tree, sometimes people neglect about, you know, applying fertilizer. And then when you apply it, you know, this is like the best time of the year to, I would recommend to use, you know, like the whole bag of compost if you have like, you know, sort of a few years old tree, or if you have a big tree, maybe you can use a few bags of compost. When you apply it, you know, when you think about it, if you have drip line, and the drip line should be, we recommend to place it, you know, within the tree canopy, because that's where tree can take up the nutrient, right? So that those are the roots that underneath. So the root will be actively, you know, take up nutrient around water, around irrigation drip line. So when you apply fertilizer, or compost, you know, make sure that you place it near that area. And then, so that's kind of, you know, where to apply fertilizer. And then the best time of the year would be in the fall, because when you spread compost, you know, it's good to water it in. And then if you have it, you water it before the rain, you know, hopefully it's not storm. So if you have maybe, you know, like some touch of rain, you know, it would slowly go down to the soil, and then, you know, give you, you know, healthy tree, continue growing healthy tree for the long term. And when you, you know, for growing tree, I would talk about mulch, but it's important that you put, you know, a layer of mulch. And we recommend that, you know, because mulch does have benefit about, you know, like not only preserving water, but it sort of help, you know, to protect the soil surface. Because if you have a storm, you know, and heavy rain, if you have bare soil, those topsoil can run off, and that's like where the nutrient accumulate. So you want to preserve that. But then when you put mulch, you know, make sure that you put it around the tree trunk, you know, keep about a couple inch or 6 inch at least. Because if the mulch touch the tree trunk, it can lead to crown rot, which is, you know, also the disease that make the tree unhealthy and die. So be aware of that. So for this picture, you know, I was talking about trees. So now we can think about plant, and this one is like sunflower, you know, it can be tomato, pepper, eggplant, you know. So when you think about plant, you know, when they were young, they don't have that much root, and then, you know, not much leaf. So they don't need a lot of fertilizer or nutrient, but eventually when they start growing, you know, bigger and bigger, you have to make sure that that root ball area, you know, like that we supply enough nutrient to the plant, which means that if you apply compost, you know, you have to time it, because if you apply today, it might not be enough for like 3 weeks. Excuse me, let me back up a little bit. So what I'm saying that, like, you know, make sure that you keep like applying, you know, nutrient that the plant would have it until the end of growing season. Because often, for those of you, if you love growing broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage, you know, you might notice that, you know, like sometimes you don't get that big of a head. and it actually can trace down to the soil nutrition, which means that you didn't have enough nutrient in the soil to supply, the big head of broccoli, cauliflower, or cabbage. So which means that you need to really have it enough in the soil in order to produce those, big head. So this is just just the idea. This is a bean plant. So when you plant bean, right, you can see how, the plant, the seed germinate, and that's what we call cotyledon. So the cotyledon is actually the sort of plant, sort of baby plant food. And eventually, the plants start having leaf. When the plant leaf out, they do produce their own food from photosynthesis. And again, so make sure that you have enough nutrient in the soil. So this is about fertilizer.
There are a few questions if you'd like to take a minute for a question or two about fertilizer.
Oh, yes.
So one question that I think is really important for this time of year is, what's the best way to condition the soil during the non-growing season? Should we be applying compost or mulch now?
Okay. So there's a couple of things. So like, I would say that, you can apply, pretty much now or pretty much prior to the rain, because like you want the rain to sort of work those like compost and sort of settle the mulch in. So I would do it, now is probably the best way. I know even though now that the next 10 days we're not going to have rain, and last time I checked, but again, do it before it rains, because if you don't have anything protect, and if it's getting cold, as a person, we're not going to go out to do any gardening. And if you neglect it, like if you let the soil not having mulch or compost on top, like I said, the bad soil, the soil erosion from topsoil is one thing, but then all the weed would show up. So the weed control is another factor that would happen. And well, it's kind of related to it's two things. So I'm going to talk about cover crop. So let's say that if you don't plan to garden, mean that you don't plan to like grow any cool season crop, which means that, all the brassica, like cabbage, cauliflower, lettuce, arugula, like if you don't want to garden at all in the fall and winter, and you just want to wait for spring, it's best to put cover crop. And another, but then if you want to plant something, so compost application is a must. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Sorry, I just have a couple of things in my head. But,
yeah, a couple of other things. One question was about the compost at the Smart Station. Do you know the Smart Station in Sunnyvale?
Yeah. I mean, I'm aware of that, but I never got that myself. So what is the question?
The question was whether it is safe, and I know the answer to the question, but I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh,
yes, it's good. It's good compost.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, like from what I understand, if it's so that's how I do have a compost talk at the end, just briefly, but like just the idea that there are different ways to compost, and I believe Sunnyvale they do compost food scrap, which is a kitchen waste. So then like in order for the resident to go pick up to use in the garden, they already test those compost, which means that it's safe to use on your gardening. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Please add more if you have. I mean,
no. I do know that the compost at the Smart Station is certified organic also, and it's used on organic farms.
All right. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, because I live in Santa Clara, so we cannot get those. But again, just the idea that like even though you go buy a bag of compost, the bulk compost, they do they go through this hot composting process, which means that they heat it up to kill all those like weed seed pathogen, so they are mixed up all those organic based material. But again, once in a while we might see a tiny piece of things, but it happened because when you think about it, that's we call windrow. I don't have a picture here, but it's like a mountain of compost that they compost it under the operation. But when it's certified, which means that they do have analysis, which is good. Yeah, so they are good compost to use on your garden.
Yes, there's been a question about if there is Roundup in the compost or glyphosate in the compost. I do know that Roundup does not persist in soil, so it would not be in the compost.
Yes, I support that. Yeah. So,
and then there was another question about, can you explain the difference between compost and fertilizer?
All right. I will have that slide coming up, but if I didn't explain well, can you remind me about this question at the end, because I do have that.
Okay, great.
Sort of, yeah, I do have compost and mulch, but and I will talk about soil amendment too. So,
excellent.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So the next part, just to clarify, let's say that well, a cover crop is a crop that is planted for the purpose of improving soil quality and nutrition, and or for attracting beneficial insects. So a cover crop that is planted in the fall and winter, that till under in spring, is often referred to as a green manure crop. So for those of you that not familiar, if you live in Sunnyvale, this is the old Full Circle farm site. The land is belong to Sunnyvale Unified School District. I just happen to be to teach here part-time. I teach field trip to the K-12 class. This is a cover crop from last winter. This is a mix of different type of cover crop, but just the idea that two things. So if you have the area that you feel like the soil hasn't been productive, or if you think that, I'm going to be busy, not having time to do my fall winter gardening, instead of leave the area alone, you can also grow cover crop, because that's pretty much you grow your own. That's kind of you can think about it's a green manure, which is mean it's a free fertilizer from the sky, because the plant biomass is actually all those nutrients that the plant the cover crop they do have a good root system, so they would take up the soil. The root will be deep, so then they lose up the soil, which is good for our clay soil, because it loosen or aerate the soil, so it reduce soil compaction, and they take up the nutrient that stay deep in the soil profile. Because if you think about it, for those of you, if you grow lettuce, most of the plant that we grow in the garden, the root would be the most probably like 15, 24 inch or 50 centimeter. Those of you that familiar with the unit, either about half a meter long or less than 2 feet. But some of these plant root can go up to like a couple feet deep. So then they all stay in this leaf biomass. So the way you do it, you don't cut. I mean, you cut it, but then you incorporate back in the soil. So when all this green cover crop decompose, it will release the nutrient for the following crop. So that's the idea of cover crop. So I sort of, so this is a nice picture to show that, what are the benefits of cover cropping. So it helps increase organic matter and available nitrogen. Like I said, it loses up the soil compaction, so it can increase the earthworm population and also a beneficial microorganism in the soil. And when that happens, it improves water and root and air penetration in the soil. So it support the healthy plant. It does provide habitat for not only beneficial insect, but like for some of you that for honeybees. So when you think about pollinators, which is mainly we think about bees. So winter month would be the bees would have a hard time find like nectar. So when you have that happen, you grow cover crop, you provide that habitat to bees, and like if you get honey from the local beekeeper, at the farmer market, the bees do travel, up to 5 miles radius. So those are the area that the bees can forage, and then we get the honey as a product. So it's create an aesthetic addition to your garden during winter dormancy. So like I said, that's pretty much last winter for that. That's like done for it. So for those of you that, familiar with the area. So for cover crop, this one is a fava bean. So fava bean, is the root system has this, it show all this little dot, and if you squish it, it's got like carb pink liquid, so that's a soil bacteria, the rhizobium. So those are special bacteria that they be able to convert the nitrogen in the air to store in the soil. So like I said, you get free nitrogen fertilizer from growing this type of cover crop, especially the legume family. So when I said that, they are the legume one that will add nitrogen to the following crop, including fava bean, veg pea, clover, alfalfa. And there are recommendations that if you grow it in a bigger area, in order to make sure that you have those bacteria present in your soil, most of the time they're not there. So the recommendation is mixing those bacteria inoculant prior to sowing seed. So that will increase nitrogen fixation. So for those non-legume, which is will add biomass and organic matter, which is help aerate the soil because they have higher carbon. And those are like grass family, Sudan grass, oat rye, you have buckwheat, mustard, and then if any of you came from Midwest, in the Midwestern area, they use the tillage radish, which is a radish that carve a daikon, but they grow very long, and they help loosen the soil, the compact soil that up to like 3 feet long, or 3 feet depth. I want to emphasize on cover crop for mustard family, or we call brassica. If you happen to think that your soil has some type of disease, it's good to have a mustard cover crop because the mustard release this chemical substance. I just blank out what's the name. Just how mustard is healthy for us. So then it's also healthy for the soil. So it's good to be part of your crop rotation. So that's what I want to underline here. And this is a garden bed that I plant fava bean here. The recommendation is to have the full benefit, you shouldn't wait until the pot form. You should actually chop it down when they flower. But, as a gardener, it's okay because, you want to pick some of those fava bean and test it, they are very good. So then you can pick some and then you can cut some. So you still have benefit of, all this biomass, maybe with a little bit less nitrogen because you harvest those pot of fava bean. So the recommendation is you cut it down, but don't dig it up. So you want the soil, you want the fava bean root to stay in the soil, but you chop, the material like the top up, and then you lay it on your garden bed, and you put it, you can put the topsoil on top. I mean, you can scrape the soil to put bury it, or the best way to do it is to put compost on top because the compost will actually help increase all sort of decomposed mulch that you have around the garden. So it will help decompose, those cut out fava bean plant. And this is actually less than 10 days. You can tell that it start decomposing. But again, it's best to wait at least 4 weeks. You don't want to plant it too soon because it might interrupt because the decomposition process still going on. So you don't want to plant it too soon because it can impact the plant that you're growing. So wait at least a month before you grow anything. And that's where I got all those, nice big tomato this year. So the question about, compost versus fertilizer. So compost is one of those that it could be both, but by definition, scientific term, compost is more like a soil conditioner or soil amendment because compost doesn't contain high nitrogen. But again, for the long-term use, when you repeat use of compost, it adds those organic matter. So then the nitrogen become sort of fertilize the plant on the long term. So the benefit of compost is more about, improving soil structure, help aerate the soil, losing soil compaction. It does add small amount of soil nutrient. So for some plant, it's not picky. So you can grow like pea, arugula, like leafy lettuce. they don't need a lot of nitrogen. But again, if you think that if you only apply compost and you don't get a big head of cabbage, cauliflower, you might have to think about adding like, fish powder, chicken manure or guano, like those high nitrogen fertilizer to boost up the production. So so for the one that we call aged manure or steer manure, so if you happen to come across, often compost would cost more than those aged manure when you look at the back, or aged poultry manure, because the term does have it translates to carb two different things. So like I mentioned earlier, for the product to be called compost, they have to go through that heating process, so it does have the labor input that, make sure that you turn it, they turn it with like all this equipment. So it does cost more per unit. But the aged manure or aged, it can be poultry or steer manure, which is like cow manure. You can think about those big pie, like the mountain of manure. Like if you drive down to Disneyland, that's lovely smell that everyone will like, okay, we're on I-5 next to Grapevine. So that area, they scrape up those manure and pile it up. And after a couple of years, they can scrape it and bag it up and sell it as an aged manure. So that's carb, make sure that when you buy it, it's not about the deal, because they often much cheaper, but you can still use it, either put in your compost pile and add nitrogen to your compost, or you can use it for your plant, but just be careful, because I noticed that when I use it, I always get a lot of weed seed out of it. And then, like if you have straw bale, those straw bale can be used as a mulch, and then, it will eventually decompose and help, amend the soil, and as well as the decomposed wood chip that we use as a mulch. So this is this is the picture from my worm bin, probably a couple of years ago. I just did sort of like want to see how it happened. I didn't chop it up, if you chop it up, it would go faster, but you see how like I had my Halloween pumpkin and all these rotten fruit and veggies. So eventually, like the worm will work their way up and it will well decompose. So that came from my worm bin. So worm composting is a cold compost. It doesn't have temperature regulate, but you sort of, it's like your pet red wiggler worm. So it's a worm that eat all this garbage that, the compost that came from this type of worm compost, it tend to be higher, like more concentrate. So let's say that, a bag of compost would have about 1 or 2% nitrogen. The worm casting is about 4 to 5% nitrogen content, which means that you use less, like when you use it, don't use too much, because they are more concentrate. So next is about mulch. So mulch is like when mulch is any material, organic or organic or inorganic, that is spread over garden soil to cover it. So when you look, so mulch can help suppress weed, and moderate soil temperature to help keep plant root cool and moist. It's helped during summer month. It conserves water, which means that you don't have to water that often. It helps to maintain a porous surface and help prevent soil erosion. So an organic mulch can improve soil structure as it decomposes over time. So there are different types of mulch. I just want to show with you that, like for beautification, they even dye mulch, so there are different colors available, but just keep in mind that eventually the color would fade down. And then, even grass clipping can be used as a mulch. We recommend that, when you mow lawn, you leave the grass clipping, because that's help recycling the nutrient back to the soil, instead of remove it. But if you have to remove it because you cannot stand that, it might look like crumbly for a couple of days or so, we recommend take those grass clipping and put it in your compost pile. So for those of you that have rock, rock does look nice, but if you have rock around the tree or bush, just make sure that rock does heat up during the summer month, and then, it sort of suffocate the plant. So that's happened that, like when you have tree that have the rock around it, or the bush that have the rock around it, and you notice that, in summer month, they don't look that healthy because the heat would heat up and then the plant would need more water. So when you place it, it's better on border, instead of like right underneath the tree, for that reason. So some of you might heard about this term sheet mulching. Bruce and I will discuss about this earlier. That a couple years back, probably 5 years ago, we went through that the time that it was a drought in California. Like you cannot, as a master gardener, we do recommend that you convert the lawn to be kind of native garden, because lawn do require a lot more water, and at some point you can only water lawn at once a week or less, which is actually suffering the lawn. So it's best to not having the lawn. But then, in order to convert the lawn to be garden area or growing native plant, the sheet mulching or sheet composting method, or AKA lasagna composting, some of you might heard about it. There are it's a simple way to convert lawn to planting area and help improve soil structure. So this is the best time to actually set it up, for fall and winter, because you want the rain to help soak it in. But when you look at the diagram, I do have the link on the handout that you will get, about how to do it. But just the idea that when you have, so you make sure that you mow the lawn short, and you can leave the clipping on top, and then you make sure that you put up to 2 inches of layer of compost on top. So you need to put quite a bit, 1 to 2 inch. You don't want to put less, because this compost will provide a microorganism to help decompose all those grass on the lawn. So then, the next layer is a 1 to 3 layer of cardboard. And again, this is like the perfect timing to save all those cardboard, shipping box from everywhere. Because, as we into pandemic, we have so many of those boxes, and recycling is good too. But again, for those, you can save them and use it. And it's crucial that you have it, like I would say like 3 layers is recommend, even though you can have 1 layer, but the more you have it, it would help loosen up the soil, because those cardboard will decompose. But just make sure that you remove all those plastic, like wrapping material, because those will not decompose and it will show up in your garden. And then again, the last layer is 3 to 4 inch of layer of mulch. And you will be able to get, those mulch, free delivery, because the tree trimming company in the area, they would do, like, I think one of them is chip drop. They would drop those for you if you would do it in a big area. So then, that would be helpful to use it as part of the sheet mulching method. All right, I think that's it. This is the end of my talk.